I had such an incredible night 2 nights ago, witnessing the lunar eclipse.
Oh, do you know what I saw on your Instagram? You had those beautiful, that I saw that. It must have just been such an amazing experience, particularly where you are.
Yeah, it really, really was. I've seen solar eclipses before, and while I find them really cool, I think I've always had a bit of a like, well, that wasn't quite as amazing as I thought it was going to be, experience them.
Yeah, no,
and sure. Then this lunar eclipse was like the polar opposite, where I just felt like, holy shit, that was tremendously more impactful than I expected it to be. It does something bizarre to the moon, which I didn't realize before, which is like, when you look up at the moon, I don't think I realized that it looks really two-dimensional. It looks really flat. Like, it really sort of looks like a picture of the moon hanging in the sky. And it's hard to really see the depth. I can always see the face, but the face isn't dimension. Well, the face is sort of like, dimension within, but not dimension without. And this was like, the moment the full eclipse had happened and the shadow was completely covering the moon, the light that was wanting to seep out from the sides of the moon just made it so visibly apparent how round it was, what a sphere it was, that it's not this flat, sort of like beaming light in the sky, that it's just this ball. And it really, because I took a photo and I posted it, but the photo made it look millions of miles farther than what it looked to my eye. To my eye, it was quite large. And it just looked like, why the hell is that thing just sitting there? Like, it should just fall. Yeah. It shouldn't be floating there. I don't know. It's hard to describe what it feels like to see natural phenomenon. I just think words often pale, but I was left with a sort of feeling of radiance and joy, and a feeling of connectedness to this mystery that we call life. And it was beautiful. So I'm still kind of like on that high. I'm kind of buzzing from it. I'm also
beautiful moment.
Yeah, I'm also exhausted because I was up till 5 a.m. watching it all.
Yeah, of course. I tell you what you just mentioned is something that always fascinates me, which is some of the most beautiful phenomena in the natural world. You can't capture the beauty of them with science, with technology, which is kind of a very powerful thing, I think. And as you said with the eclipse, it's like if you try and take a photograph of a harvest moon, there've been a couple, which is a phenomenon you don't get very often here in the UK. And so, but every now and again, I've been, say, driving across the Midwest and I've seen a harvest moon and I've parked over and watched it. It's like, my God, that is just amazing. It's like looking at a comic book panel, where the moon is so vast. And you take a picture of it and you look at your photo and it's like the moon's tiny as it always is. Yeah, it's like, what's going on? And I think, and it's like, if you've ever had the experience of, say, you go to the Grand Canyon and you take photos of the Grand Canyon, the vast epic nature of it is lost. It's just flat.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally lost.
Hawaiian sunsets, amazing, but never look as good. Yeah. In a picture.
Pretty much given up on taking pictures of that kind of stuff for that very reason. And last night I just thought, oh, why am I even bothering? This is ridiculous. When I lifted my camera, I was like, this is one of the most ridiculous things in the world. To try and photograph what I'm experiencing right now is impossible. But I'm glad I did, because there was something that happened in that particular photo that I thought was really interesting, which was it just somehow captured the vastness of space, which was not what I was seeing. I was seeing the closeness of the universe. I was seeing like the stars were really vivid because the moon had been eclipsed and the moon looked so enormous and it looked so clear and all these things. But what the photo captured was the vastness. And I kind of loved the dichotomy of how it can be both at once. I loved that it can be this vast, unknowable expanse, this void, but it also can be this intimate, light-filled, energy compacted experience. So I'm glad I did take the picture, but normally I don't even take pictures of people, because I feel like it's not ever going to capture what I'm experiencing. And what I'm experiencing is what I want. I want to do the experience, right? I want to be in it. I want to not step outside of it and capture it. I want to be in it. And sometimes I look around at the world today and kids and how they're being raised where every single thing that happens, good, bad, or ugly, is being captured by a photograph or a video, documented. And that they can constantly relive these things. And again, there's this sort of dichotomy of like, how beautiful that they're going to have such vivid memories of childhood that we will never have, because we just, they fade, you know, they sort of go away. Whereas these kids, it won't fade. It'll be right there documented. They can always go back and revisit. But then also, I think there's a loss of understanding of what it means to, what beauty is for in the world. Like, to me, I actually wrote a first draft of a novel about this years ago, trying to capture my sort of realization that the purpose of beauty really in this world is temporal, that it's supposed to be a moment, just a moment that sort of washes over you and you go, oh God, that feels incredible. And that's what beauty is. But we are so graspy, you know, we want to just grab it and hold it and hang on to it and make it permanent and have it always, always, always there to look at. And so that if I feel bad or I feel yucky, I can look at it and I go, oh, and now I feel good again. And we want that hit. And I think it just is such an evidence that we've lost trust that life will continually recycle beauty and bring it back to us no matter what. It will be there. We don't have to grab onto it. And
you don't need it. It's so true. You don't need to collect it. And you know, it doesn't, you don't need to turn an experience into a possession that way, because there's always another experience to be had. And it's like, I really notice it with people at concerts, well, until concerts were placed on hold, music concerts. It's like, my thing with music concerts, if I want to, like, say, put up an Instagram picture of having been there, I will take my shot within the first 5 minutes of it. When the band comes on, say, all right, click. Then I'll stick it in my pocket, and that's it. You know, because I want to drink in the experience. I want to stand there holding a phone up, because people are so focused on getting the shot right and getting the angle of the shot right, you can't be appreciating the music in the right way.
No, I feel
it's kind of the beauty of live theatre that don't let you do it.
Yeah, exactly. I have, whenever I see video footage, like the official concert footage, and it pans the crowd, and the crowd is just a bunch of screens, you know, just this pan of screens just being held up. And I always think, well, one, you can't really see what's on stage, because there's all these screens blocking what's actually going on. And then secondly, how present can you be in the experience of art that you're having? And for me, the experience of art is always one that is spiritual. It's like an immersion. It's a letting go and a sort of falling into and giving over to. But if you're really self-conscious about what's happening in a way that you're like, I need to capture this, then suddenly that becomes lost, where you can't, for me, I can't just completely give over to that experience. And like you, I will have to do it within the first 5 minutes, or I'll forget, because I will give over to the experience and I'll get so immersed in what I'm doing, what I'm feeling. The last thing on my mind is taking a picture of it or a video of it. It just won't even occur to me for the rest of the concert.
Yeah. I think that's very true. So I witnessed something a couple of years ago, which was there's the stage play Lazarus, which is a kind of a stage play sequel to The Man Who Fell to Earth, and it was the last project that David Bowie worked on before he passed away, and it was on in London in a pop-up theatre at King's Cross, famous station here, and the star of the show was Michael C. Hall. Brilliant actor, the guy who played Dexter on that Showtime series. He's been in a bunch of like great stuff. You know, he's got a great energy to him, and he plays Thomas Newton, the Bowie character. And it's a musical, but when it starts, when you file into the purpose-made theatre, he is lying on the floor of this very small purpose-made theatre, just in a prone position. So everyone who's passing him is like, you could put your arm out and touch his arm.
No way.
And people just can't fucking resist, in what was probably then 2017 or something, getting their phones out and trying to take pictures of them. They had a whole squad of like burly men and women who were like handing out the programs and whatever, who clearly primed that if you see somebody do this, you've got to wrestle them to the ground. So they were just like body checking people out the way because they didn't want to shout out no cameras. They had signs up saying no cameras because essentially the performance had already started. So they just used the application of force to do that. I thought in and of itself, it became, for me, it was part of the entertainment. I was fascinated because every time somebody else knew what into the auditorium, I thought, are they? And you see them going for the camera, and then suddenly somebody appears and wrestles them, goes, no, and whispers in their ear, you can't take the photo, don't do it. It doesn't make a big deal, but
about that, I love so much, is that they're breaking the physical barrier that has become so humanistically sacred, right? Nobody's allowed to touch each other. Not just the COVID thing, but like in general, our culture has become so anti-touch. Whereas I think, historically, cultures have been much, much more tactile, both in a loving way and a violent way. There's just been much more ability to reach into another person's space and connect or offend, one or the other. But I love that, like, for me, theater is so much more visceral than the screen, because you feel like you could reach out and touch them. You feel like you can almost smell the sweat on their skin. It's probably the guy sitting next to you in that hot little theater, but like, there's like a really physical element to it. And that just breaks that fourth wall completely and takes it into a space that has now become very taboo. But I actually think is paramount to community. Like I have such a strong belief that touch is paramount to community. And I'm a very tactile person. So, right up front, I just sort of like, I'm out with it. Like, not everyone will agree because not everyone is tactile the way I am. But all my life, I have always reached out and as a way of connection in place of words or service or, some other form of connection. I've always been very comfortable, like putting a hand on someone's shoulder to say, I'm sorry, or, tapping somebody's knee to say right on, or like, just ruffling someone's hair to say like, we're having, like, just all those ways of being tactile. And I've noticed over the last 10 years that more and more and more people are shocked and uncomfortable when I do that, because it's become less and less and less normal and less okay. So I love that they just completely broke all the societal rules about you are not supposed to accost people. You talk first. You use communication, right? I love it.
No,
I love it. I feel like you couldn't get away with that in America.
It was so
the only England.
No, it was so brilliantly interceptive, right? And I'm not a typical English person, because I too am very tactile, and whereas there's a lot of British people are really quite reserved, and you can go to whole cities in the UK where nobody is and I remember my grandmother was always very physically reserved, and she would respond with a hug only when you went in first and made her, and then she'd do it, and she'd want you to do it, but she'd never ever initiate. Oh
my God. I remember when I was dating Dominic Monaghan, and he's Mancunian, and I first met his father, who was just the most lovely Irishman, but like very English in his reserve, and the first time I met him, I was excited to meet him. I'm Canadian. I just came at him with the biggest hug, and I wrapped him up in a bear hug, and he literally went, oh, and he fell off the curb. It was so uncomfortable, but I know he loved it too. Like, I know that for him, that's not how he would respond, but there was something in him that was touched too. Like, he wasn't uncomfortable in a bad way. Just, it was so outside of his comfort zone. He literally fell off the curb.
Now it's wonderful that once again we've backed into the central point of the conversation that we're about to have. So welcome to Hard Degree, everybody. I'm Andrew Sumner. I'm here with my friend Evangeline Brains Lilly, and this is Evangeline Lilly's Library of the Soul, week 4, and we're here to talk about The Presence Process by Michael Brown, a journey into present moment awareness, which is all about the concept of being focused, living in the moment, embracing the moment we're in right now, which funnily enough happens to have been exactly what we've been talking about for the last couple of minutes.
How ironic, right?
Yeah.
I actually thought that at one moment mid-conversation, I was like, wait a minute, this is exactly what the book's about.
Right
How
on.
amazing.
I know. And we didn't even plan it. That's the thing. I know. That's
nobody's going to believe us.
That's unit. I know they'll just think these fucking bullshitters. I sat there with their chart of like, talk about eclipse, talk about reserve, talk, as if it was some roadmap. Yeah, but you can say with your hand on your heart, you didn't know I was going to tell you about my experience of seeing Lazarus, and I didn't know you were going to tell me about Dermot Moynihan's dad. So it's all beautifully in the moment.
Yes, it is. Yes,
so before we start talking about the book, I'm going to tell you something which is far and away of the 4 books we've looked at so far. This is the one that really speaks to me. This really had a lot to say to me personally, and I haven't started the exercises. I have read the preamble up to the exercises, but why I'm 100%. I'm going to do the 10 weeks of it starting this weekend for sure. So I don't know if that was your sense of how I would feel about it, but it really spoke to me. I don't agree with all of it, and I don't agree with every thesis that he pops up with, but there was so much that really resonated with me. I found it a fascinating read.
I actually had no idea. I think I remember telling you at the end of our last discussion that I was so curious as to what your reaction would be, because I think I had a sense of what your reaction would be to the vision. I think I had a sense of probably what your reaction would be to conversations with God, although less so. And I think the Red Tent being a novel and a well-written novel, it felt like, well, even if he doesn't resonate with some of the more pronounced feminine, energetic, spiritual messages, I think that it's just a lovely read. So this one really took us into a space that was kind of neutral in that it doesn't have a dogma attached. And I think that's where I was curious, because anytime there's a dogma attached, you can probably guess at somebody's reaction. Once you sort of understand their politics, their religious beliefs and that sort of thing, then you sort of know what you throw at them, if it's going to stick to the wall or not, or if it's going to incite some sort of shitty reaction. Yeah. And this one, it doesn't have any dogma attached, or at least not an obvious dogma attached, not that I can deduce. And so I was interested. I just thought, I'm so curious, because you're a very cerebral person, and it definitely calms the monkey mind by addressing it, by talking to our intellect, by talking to our reason. But it's really not focused there. It's much more focused in what I would call a spiritual space, but maybe somebody else might call an energetic space, or just presence, the just being present, being here. Like, what does that mean? What is existence? Maybe is another word for it.
No, I think that's the right way to express it. That feels right to me. I think for me personally, one of the things that I've kind of been on a journey with throughout my life is dialing down the feverish pace at which my brain ticks over all the time. And that's one of the reasons I've always been plagued with insomnia. I've always been a poor sleeper, and I've always naturally upped myself. So I'm somebody who's always rarely ever asleep before 2 a.m. and struggles to fall asleep because my brain just won't let things go, and I'm constantly and I have very active sort of dream experience, and for many years one of the things that I had an issue with was kind of the anxiety, or focusing on the anxiety of what was going to happen next, of consequences of things that would happen as a result of what I'd done in the moment, and where that was going to go. Not necessarily a fear of that, but a complete obsession with what's the ripple effect of this going to be, if that makes sense. So not so much, oh my God, this terribly dark force is coming and I don't understand what it is. Much more a case of, well, I did this today, so how exactly what's that going to lead to? Will it lead to this, plan A? Will it lead to plan B? Will it lead to plan C? And I've kind of been on a journey to calm that down. What I've felt about my own life. I'm sorry, Evangeline, what was that?
You said you've been on a journey to calm that down. I'm curious, like,
For
how long has that been?
I would say,
yeah.
Consciously. I would probably began that process. Let's see, I'm 57 now. I probably began that process. I pretty much know when it was. There was a friend of mine called Ali Hall, who is a well-known magazine editor in the UK. She used to edit a magazine called Look, which is a weekly women's fashion magazine. And I gave her first editorial appointment. I didn't give, she earned it. I didn't give it to her, but I was the person who appointed her. And she had been a features editor, and an opportunity to edit a title came up that I was the publisher of, and I stepped her up kind of 4 job roles just in one day, in one conversation, because I could see it had nothing to do with me. It was her achievement, but I could see that she had all this ability, and that she was somebody that could handle actually running everything rather than just being part of the machine. Yeah. And she and I worked closely together for a couple of years. Around about the sort of early 2000s, the very early 2000s, I had a bunch of things that aspects of my life that had changed, and we were talking about a bunch of things, and she was very in touch with her sense of self, sense of spirituality. She was somebody who had kind of focused herself just through trying to focus on being in the moment, and that really spoke to me. And since about that point, which is about 17 years, I would say that's really been the journey when I've had a real awareness of it. And Ali's an incredibly smart and gifted person, but she's from Manchester as well, and she lives back up there now, and she runs a great sort of online clothing business, right? And she's entrepreneurial, but she's very focused and in the moment. And it's kind of one of those things where, it's an experience where in the working office publishing world, you're managing a bunch of people, but in fact, you actually end up learning far more from them than they learn from you. That was always my experience of having relatively senior jobs in the publishing business, that there were a load of times when I thought, man, I had no idea about this. This has opened up a whole new doorway for me. So she focused me on that kind of journey. And I think maybe for the past 17 years, and I feel it's something that I've made a lot of progress with. And, you're always learning, right? The journey's sort of infinite, right? But having her in my life and having those conversations, she'd probably be very surprised to listen to this, because I'm thinking, when was the last time we spoke? It was probably 10 years ago. But the impact, sometimes people have a huge impact on you, and sometimes they're not even always aware of it themselves. She definitely had a big impact upon me, and really helped me get in touch with the concept of presence, which of course is what this book is all about. So I've been on that journey for quite a long period of time, with some success, I think, because I'm far more able. I notice whenever I'm able to put myself in the moment and not get distracted by what's happened, this concept of past, this concept of future, this concept of consequence, or mulling over what might have happened if I'd done something differently. If I leave all that to one side, I've noticed that life often goes so much better, and I feel so much happier with the things that I experience.
Gosh, I feel like
that was a very long answer to a very short question, but it also just hemorrhaged out to me.
I'm very interested, and I think it's so beautiful that you can actually pinpoint a person who was so influential for you. And I think I feel that from both sides, because we all, I think, wander through life hoping desperately that we'll have some kind of positive impact on somebody out there. And also that somebody will reach out and touch us in a way that impacts us beautifully and meaningfully. And so I think I don't know, I feel like I hear less of those stories nowadays. That used to be like the story when in the 80s. When I was growing up, that was the story.
Yeah.
And now I feel like stories are much more focused on kind of doing it on your own, like overcoming all the odds in an isolated way, being strong and powerful despite everything else, as opposed to, and then there was that person.
Yeah.
And then there was that person who reached out. So I loved hearing it all. And I was thinking, as you were talking about it, that that for me, I used to be, you said always, you've always been that way, which is interesting to me, because that means I assumed that even as a child, that you had a brain that worked that way.
Absolutely.
And
yeah. Ever since I was first aware of my own kind of internal mental process.
And that's crazy. I reached, the reason why why this book came into my life was because I had reached a point where last time we were speaking, we were talking about the red tent. And in that, when I read the red tent, I had fallen in love. I had gotten pregnant. I was starting a completely new season of my life. I had retired from acting, at least so I thought.
Yeah.
I thought I was done with that. I was retiring into a quiet life of motherhood and writing, and that was going to be the end for me. That was pre-Hobbit, pre-Marvel, and then falling in love and becoming a mother changed things so profoundly for me. I mean, up to that point in my life, I had been fighting clinical depression for about 10 years with some success, actually pretty good success, but there was this shift that happened once I found Norman, where I truly became happy, probably for the first time in my life, like truly happy. Something inside of me settled, something felt at peace. And what's ironic is that throughout all that time where I had been, I'd been clinically depressed for as long as I can remember, I had the opposite of you. I was so present, and I was so clear, and I never had a sleep problem. I didn't know the meaning of the word worry. I really could not connect to or understand what people meant when they talked about anxiety. I was so clear and here, to a fault, to the point where, I couldn't remember an appointment to save my life, because I was never thinking about the future, and I was never thinking about the past. And I was just totally irresponsible as a result, but also beautifully at peace with life.
Yes.
And ironically, through experiencing happiness, through experiencing content, suddenly a door opened up that I can only describe as greed. That I was suddenly like greedy for life. I was like, I want it all. I just want everything. I want success. I want joy. I want experiences. I want to just conquer the world. Like, I just was like, whoo, like I felt really on fire in the most beautiful way. But that greed led to that beautiful greed, it's like a gorgeous greed just for like to suck life of all of its nectar, not like, not just power and money, but like, I want to be in nature. I want like whatever it is, just everything. I started down this path unknowingly, which turned into what you described, where I had sleep problems, I had digestive problems, I had health failings, I had all of these other problems manifesting that seemed out of place with the joy I felt inside. But, unbeknownst to me, there was this static building in my brain that was just getting louder and louder and louder, to the point where there wasn't a moment's peace ever inside of there. When I went to see a healer, and he was like, "Are you stressed?" I was like, "No, my life is fantastic." And he was like, "Okay, but there's good stress and there's bad stress. Like, is your life intense?" I was like, "Oh, it's so intense." And basically I was manifesting so many things physically that were becoming unbearable. I was becoming physically in chronic pain. I was having massive sleep problems. And it was that healer who was the first person to introduce me to meditation. He was the first person to guide me through a meditation. And that was a mind-blowing experience. My very first time ever in a guided meditation, I went into a timeless space. I was at my birth. I was at my children's birth. I was living past lives. I was in the future. I was in outer space. I was here I went into the most profound places and spaces and came out with this overwhelming glow. And he was the one who said to me, "Listen, I have read so many books, spiritual books, these kinds of books, and almost every single one, I find myself being like, yeah, that's great, but you know, just not quite, you know, like I get it. I get what you're after, but yeah. And he was like, this one is special, and you need to read it and try to do the process. And so I did. And it suggests in the intro that you do it 3 times. Well, I was not a repeat reader of anything. I was not a repeat watcher of anything. I'm a very like, keep going, keep moving forward. I don't sort of stay in one place for very long. But I ended up doing it 4 times.
Wow.
4 times. And the first time felt like...
So that's virtually a year of your life, right?
Oh, no, it took... So you're supposed to do it in 10 weeks.
Yeah.
It took me forever. It took the first time I did it, I think I did it over a year.
Ah, right. Okay, got it.
So long to get through it. It was not like I did not bang out the process. I think you're supposed to, but I was so I was invited into spaces that were so profound to me that I needed time with every tiny step. Like sometimes I would read a paragraph and I would have to sort of just live with that paragraph for a couple months, because it was so impactful. And I sort of needed to like integrate what I was learning in a way that took time. So it actually, over the course of, it's more like, let's see, I think that was 2016, I think. So about 4 years, about once a year I did it. And it has been different every time and has had a profound impact in a way that I could never prove was directly connected to the process. Like in the way that the process describes, where it seems like everything is just sort of orchestrating and coordinating in a completely unlinear way, you know, in a way that doesn't, you can't sort of go, oh, well, A led to B and B led to C, and so therefore D. It's just in my heart, I can feel how all these pieces have like moved and shifted in my life and come to a place where I kind of, in a horribly traditional Christian way, I feel like I've been reborn in a way. Like there's been a return to the innocence I used to carry.
Yeah.
And also layered with a maturity and a wisdom that's come with the pain and the time of suffering through, you know, depression, and then physical issue after physical issue after physical issue that have all almost been completely resolved now.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. Would you be able to just give the bare bones of, clearly this is a book that you have to read to really drink it in, but what your experience of the bare bones of the process actually is?
It sounds so reductive to say it out loud.
Yeah.
But it's a breathing practice. It's a breathing practice that essentially asks you to, twice a day, hopefully ideally at the beginning of the day and the end of your day, sit down and make space for what is, and not fight it and not analyze it and not resist it, but allow whatever is to be, which sounds really basic and simple. But the reality is, I think most of us spend our entire day running from what is, which is often our feelings. You know, I think a lot of our lives are spent avoiding what we call negative feelings and chasing what we call positive feelings. And essentially, you know, again, it's very reductive to put it into like a tiny sound bite, but the presence process offers the idea that there is no such thing as a bad feeling or a good feeling, that all feelings are extremely valuable and beautiful and good. And that if we make space for them, they are our guides, and they will take us into the deepest places of ourselves where we can do the inner work we need to do to move through the world in presence and peace, so that we can be with whatever's happening and not find ourselves running away with coping mechanisms, running away into work, running away into distraction, running away from ourselves over and over and over again until we're so disconnected from ourselves that we manifest dis-ease or some form of disease, whether it's an addiction or whether it's, you know, an actual physical ailment, or whether it's an injury, or whether it's a broken relationship, or whatever it is, that we will manifest those things the farther and farther we run from the truth of what's within us.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
No, that I think that's very well expressed, actually, and I think it's just worth touching upon where the author Michael Brown was coming from when he first created this book, which is that essentially he was somebody who suffered from Horton's syndrome and suffered through 10 years of chronic pain, I believe. I think he's a South African guy, right? Brent, I think that's what he is.
Is he South African or Australian? Oh, he is South African. I was thinking he was Australian.
Yeah, and basically this is a set of practices he came up with once he got to the point where, okay, I'm one of the side effects of this illness is kind of chronic neuralgic pain that doesn't really leave you, and it was his way of sitting in the moment with that pain, and the thing that helped him draw this kind of roadmap was that beginning, and I found that really quite fascinating. So this is really a question of self-applied practice to try and deal with the issues he was facing, and this book was the outcome.
Yeah, I think that it's also worth mentioning that, you know, he says at the beginning of the book that he reached a place where he realized, I have to decide whether or not I'm going to check out or check in.
Yeah,
it was either suicide or figure out how to live with this pain, this unbearable, mind-numbing neurological pain. And that his journey into that pain was then the fruit of that journey into that pain was the process, and that it was actually just an exercise in self-healing or self-work, whatever you want to call it, that he wasn't trying to create something for other people to follow. It was entirely selfish. It was entirely about, I can't live with this. I need help. And I can't find it out there, so I'm going to look for it in here.
Yeah.
And I find it really interesting because I'm actually, there's a parallel happening right now where I'm working with this man named Eric Goodman in preparing for Quantum Mania. We're going to shoot that soon, the new Ant-Man and the Wasp film. And I have been out of commission for about 2 years now, physically. Yes. And so I got very nervous about needing to go back and do such a physical role when physically I've been so weak for so long. And so I'm trying to build strength back into my system, back into my nervous system, my structural system, my muscular system, my, you know, all my different physical systems. And again, sort of, I feel like it just came to me or showed up in my life, this guy named Eric Goodman, who in a very similar way was, by the time he graduated college, in chronic pain, like immobilizing back pain, as he was graduating from chiropractic medical school. So he's the guy who's supposed to be healing everyone else, and he cannot fix like what is wrong in his body, and had 6 doctors say, you need back surgery.
Yeah.
And he knew as a medical student that back surgery basically is the end of ever having a healthy back, right? Like it's just going to send you down a spiral of further weakness and further issues. And so he resolved to figure out how to fix himself because nobody else had been able to fix him. And he created a process called foundation training that he's now passing on to other people, including myself. And it is revolutionary. Like, and for me, I've gone to lots of physiotherapists, and this was the first time I felt like, oh, finally, somebody's not just doing what we've always done. Finally, somebody's saying there's got to be a better way, and figuring it out and using their own deep inner wisdom to figure out what is that better way. And it is better. And it is, to me, it's like an evolution in science. This, to me, I feel like he's made an evolutionary leap in medical science as far as like structurally what we should be doing to help our bodies. And for me, I feel like that's what Michael Brown did spiritually, is he made an evolutionary leap out of necessity, out of desperation, out of deep weakness and deep need and deep pain. He needed to live in a better way, and he found a way.
Yeah. I think it's really quite powerful what he achieved. And what's interesting about it, you know, for me, who, you know, I tend to arc more on the empirical than the spiritual side of things.
Yeah.
Although, like everybody, I have a spiritual dimension to my life. But there's a lot of parallels with the core of this book to the work that a doctor called Dr. Laurie Santos does. Evangeline, have you ever heard of her?
No, so, I now have to write it down.
Dr. Laurie Santos has got a podcast which is produced by Pushkin Industries, which is Malcolm Gladwell's company, and it's called The Happiness Lab. And she is a psychologist.
Oh, I've heard of the Happiness Lab.
Yeah, she's a psychologist at Yale, and she teaches the most popular course in Yale history, which is Science of Happiness. And she came as a result of, she came to it because she's a professor there at Yale, but she's one of the professors who is essentially like in a British private school, Gryffindor or whatever. So let's say she's running the Gryffindor of Yale, and in the course
she would
of
love that reference, I'm sure.
I'm sure she would. Yeah, I'm sure she would. If destroying all her brilliant work just through these casual pop culture references. But she's kind of a brilliant and very you know, she's a very charismatic person, and in the course of looking after these students and realizing how many issues these students, she should be on top of the world. They're the smartest, some of the smartest people in any given year. They've dedicated their entire lives to getting to Yale, which is almost impossible to get into. And they've got into Yale, and some of them are on these amazing scholarships. And rather than being in the moment and celebrating this incredible education that they have access to in this incredible place, in fact, they lead lives of stress, and they can only look, you know, kind of one semester in front of them, and it's all about passing exams and cramming and all this kind of stuff. And she said she was struck by the fact that almost none of these students seem to be having a good time. They're really high-performing students who all appear to be miserable. And what the Happiness Lab is all about, it distills that course that she created, which is basically using her doctrines, which is kind of evidence-based research and science, to figure out how people can be more happy. But a big finding, one of the big elements to the whole thing, is about being in the moment and being present. And so she has come to exactly the same conclusions for part of what she talks about as the author of this book has, but through an evidence-based science story. And that fascinates me because they're saying virtually the same thing. Yeah. Which is
one of the things I found. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, carry on, please.
I was going to say one.
Sorry.
No, you go. No, you finish.
I was just going to say she's basically one of the big focuses that she has is that you have to be present and in the moment and take time out in every day to breathe deeply and center yourself where you are, and that any form of, whether you want to call, you know, whatever you want to call that, whether you want to call it meditation, whatever, that is incredibly beneficial, and everyone should do it. Just take 10 minutes to do it every day, to center yourself and just focus on the moment and don't think about anything else. And it's a very powerful thing, and it's exactly what this book says. That's how it feels.
Exactly. And actually, Michael Brown, I noticed I've read this 4 times, and I was revisiting it again this week in preparation for the podcast. And I noticed something I'd never really noticed before, which was in his Reawakening intro. He says, once he had sort of discovered that this process or this practice was having this profoundly positive effect on him, he went ahead and he said, to discover more about this tool, I began facilitating others in this breathing practice, closely observing the effects. So he basically became like a social scientist and said, okay, well, it worked for me, but like, I don't know, let's see if there's something in this. I want to see what happens when other people do it. And, you know, I've recommended, when I first discovered this book and it had such an impact for me, I went to a very similar place. I bought a case of them, because I found myself constantly meeting people and be like, oh man, you know, you would really benefit from this process. Here, have a book. And I had one woman come back to me, and She was very young. She had terrible anxiety. And if there's one thing I had learned so far, was that the people who I recommended the book to who suffered from very severe anxiety, almost across the board had profound results in anxiety reduction from this process. So I said, oh, you should really check this book out. So she did. And she came back to me. And this was years later, like a year or two later, because we really were just acquaintances. And we happened to see each other again. And she said, I did that book. And whenever I would try to do this breathing practice, my anxiety would go berserk, like the worst it's ever been. And I said, wow, that's really, really interesting. I'm sort of curious as to what that felt like for you and where you took that, like where you went with that. Because of course, as you've read the book, you've read, I don't know what you've read so far, because I can't really remember what was in the process part and what was in the preamble part. But the instruction is always, whatever comes up, no matter how uncomfortable, go into it, like go deeper, move towards it, don't run away from it. And so we talked it through, and I was excited and also sort of devastated for her that her, whatever she was facing was so deep, and she was so resistant to it, that even this breathing practice would take her to a place that was scary for her, that there was fear there. And I also had another, my young woman who was like 18 when I recommended the book to her, and she could not get through the preamble reading. She could not. And I've seen that with two other people. And what I started to realize through just watching different people's reaction to it was that I think that there is a certain level of self-awareness and personal work that if you've already done it, then this process is accessible immediately to you. And I think, like you were saying, you've probably spent the last 13 years sort of doing some of this work on your own, learning how to move into these spaces. And I think that often happens with age, right? Like the longer we've been alive, the more we start to see our own shit and understand that there are ways through it without being completely repulsed by it or in fear of it. Because I think when we're young, we sort of have this anticipation that like everything's supposed to be great. And if things go awry, there's something deeply wrong and wrong with me. I think there's often a resultant sort of self-deprecation that happens if your life isn't sort of perfect when you're young. You think, well, that's clearly a reflection that I'm not perfect and that I need to get better at being, as opposed to this whole process is perfect. And this horrible thing that's happening is for me. It's a gift so that I can grow and learn and understand, right? And so I have seen various reactions to it, but I do believe that that her, Laurie Santos, that her studies and that Michael Brown's studies are sort of conclusive that if you are willing to do the hard work and you have the discipline to carry on, even when it brings out some of the scarier things we deal with or we hide or we suppress or push down, that the results are bar none. I've never had anything else in my life be so profoundly powerful. And being able to completely change my state of mind in like 3 minutes, within, it's now, I've been doing it for 6 years, and it's now gotten to the point where I can be midday in the midst of something and just be recognizing what's going on in my mind, recognizing the growing static, the growing kind of noise that wants to be maddening, and just step away for 3 minutes and just connect my breathing and connect to the peace that is constantly available to us. And it just dissipates. It's like reality morphs and changes in a moment.
I'm so interested in that, because where I'm not on my journey with this stuff is that where I'm still capable of tripping myself up is if something happens that it represents some kind of problem or some event that I don't have a solution to, usually in the course of my working life, and running any kind of company with a variety of different characters and a variety of different outputs, because the business I work for, there's publishing, there's events, there's all kinds of different things happening, and it's all about scheduling, right? And it's all about relationships with external forces. Things come up, and sometimes it's like, oh man, everything I wanted to do, I can no longer do that. And in the course of like 1 30-second conversation, my entire plan for X, Y, and Z has now been dashed to the ground, right? And in those moments, what I still have not mastered is I will frequently get dragged into, my brain will drag myself into trying to figure that problem out. And then it might dominate my thinking for a day, for a week, for a month. And in that period of time, I completely forget to do any of the things that I've listened to on the Happiness Lab, or that I've read about, or, I really forget to meditate or to take myself out the moment, all that stuff that the minute and it's weird, it's almost like I forget about it. And then something again will happen, will just remind, oh yeah, shit, I should be doing this. The minute I start doing it again, boom, it totally works. But I haven't got to that point where you are, where it's like, I'm where I want to be, is that I just fucking remember to do this stuff all the time, and that it becomes an instinct. And I think that's where I want to get to with it. And what spoke to me about this particular book, because it effectively is a 10-week set of exercises, part of what I think it's trying to achieve is that you're drilling a habit into yourself.
Yeah. And I am... Yeah, go.
No, that's what spoke to me.
Yeah, well, and I am like the most anti-structure, anti-schedule. I am so right-brained. Everything in me rejects anything that is rigid or continuous, or like I just want to flow. I just want to move. I just want to like feel my reality and move through it in such a hippy-dippy way. And I think you might remember that when we first started this podcast mini series, we were talking about the vision. And I told you that when that book first came into my life, I was 21 and I was fasting. And in that time of fasting, a 3-day fast, the message that God had given me during that time, that was, I believe, why I was called into fasting, was develop a practice, a daily practice. Every morning before you start your day, before you do anything, you come and you connect with me. You come and you make space for this. And that was my conviction. That was my message. That was my like lightning message through 3 days of fasting. This is what you are being called to. And it was Michael Brown that got me there.
Yeah.
Because as much as my heart was like, yes, God, that's what I want to do. And when I was baptized when I was 16, most kids, you have to choose a Bible verse, and that's your verse. You claim a verse. And most kids were claiming these like very, very well-known verses. And I had just asked for guidance, flipped open my Bible and asked God to show me. And the verse that I was given is to this day, like if I had to get a tattoo, it would still be 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 10, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. That was my heart. That was always my heart. And so I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. I want to come and I want to be before you, and I want to listen and receive guidance and move through my day completely guided in the most, beautifully divine way. And yet this right brain creative artist just could not make it happen. I didn't have the discipline. I was so disciplined in my life in every other way. I mean, it took a lot of discipline to get to the places I got to in life and to do the things I did. But that was the one place where, very similar to you, it was like, why? Why is this the one place I can't seem to just commit and make it happen? And it's taken 6 years. It's taken 6 years. I've been doing this process for 6 years. But finally, I was brought, the messengers or the circumstances I needed have been brought into my life, and they have kicked my ass so hard for these past 6 years that I have finally found myself on my knees enough, broken enough to submit and be like, okay, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. You know, and the book was like, okay, I'll tell you what to do, and this is what you do.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing I've been telling you for 20 years, which is like, just make it a habit. Because otherwise, if you don't, when crisis strikes and you go into your animal brain and you're out of your prefrontal cortex, you are not going to do this. It will not be part of your instinct, because this is not part of your animal instinct. And so when things are intensely good or intensely bad, you will not do this. And then you will have way more stress and way more problems in your life. And since I have finally made it a daily practice, every morning, every night, with, you know, of course, flexibility, that, like, you know, I have to be careful because I can get too rigid. I'm a very pendulum swingy person. I mean, I don't think I'm manic, but I'm very like hyper focused, or just off in the clouds, totally not paying attention to anything. And so for me, I have to watch that I don't get too rigid with it, where it then becomes just a discipline, you know, and there's nothing present about that. There's nothing loving about that. But it has really been profound to watch how, because it's finally a regular thing I do daily, when I hit those moments where it usually would just fall off. And, you know, sometimes for months, because I would get so derailed by something that happened at work or something that happened in life. I'm catching myself so much faster now, you know, I would say within the day that something happens, I'm starting to see the process go on in my brain, watch it happen, and be like, you know, just go breathe. And then it's just amazing what clears. It's just amazing the clarity that comes. And with work, I think that's profound. When you can walk into a professional situation and be triggered, you know, because we get triggered so much at work. And we've been taught, suppress it, overcome it, be stronger than that. Don't let it affect you. And I'm learning, no, let it affect you. Let it really affect you. Let all of that come in, but don't ignore it. Just make some space, sit with it, and see what it's trying to show you. See where it wants to take you. And then it's like, holy shit, just everything revolutionizes, even at work, even in the most mundane situations.
Yeah, I feel that. I think the establishment of an all-encompassing habit is really the key to making this work. And this just might be the real, for me, we'll see at the end of the series, the real takeaway episode for me, because I feel, in having had this conversation with you, that there's a real lesson here for me in terms of what I can do. And I know what the lesson is. That's not the problem, because I've learned the lesson already. And whatever the gateway to the lesson is, or it's Dr. Laurie Santos, who, by the way, I might not even appreciate being talked about in the same conversation as a self-help book, because her thing is evidence-based research, and most self-help books aren't any good for you. But I'm going to tell you the real scientific reason why this is psychologically sound, and they happen to touch upon a lot of this. But her work and this guy, Michael Brown, are really saying the same thing. And I've known about it for a long time. So I think if I manage to actually grasp it and make it that habit, I'll have really achieved something for myself.
I will challenge. I bet you we're going to have to talk to Laurie. We're going to have to get Laurie on the phone and talk to her, because I think that if you look at the process that Michael Brown went through to get to this, it is exactly the process that a scientist uses to get to any conclusion, which is experimentation, observation, and assessment. Yeah. And he went all over the world. He visited different shamans, healers, doctors, every available form of healing that anybody could refer him to. And if anybody was like, this shit works, he tried it. He made himself the lab rat. And he really documented, I don't know if it's, you know, on paper, but inside of himself, he made mental notes the whole way through of like, that worked, that didn't work, that worked, but only temporarily. And he was doing this very long form experiment. And he had a thesis, and, you know, it eventually that developed out of it. And then he started testing that thesis on other test subjects. So really, it's like, to me, it is the epitome of science, what he did and the process he went through.
Yeah. You literally took the words out of my mouth, and that's exactly what I was going to say.
Cool.
It's the epitome of the scientific approach. Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. I get that. Interestingly, by the way, the other thing that I've often become ground up on in the course of these conversations, which went away last week because the book was so well written, is how well written the books are. Yeah, and I just thought I'd log in as a by the by. I don't think this book is particularly well written, and I don't think it matters at all. Right, and there are also things in there which
tell you were going back out into the desert.
It was a regression back into okay, that the concept is the important thing, and there are some theories that he postulates, which I found within. So essentially, the first third of the book is a preamble about how he came to this and what his thinking is. Some of his thinking, which is some of the tributaries he investigates along the way of making his core point. I read it and thought, okay, mate, I just think this is filler. I'm not feeling this at all. So just to remind you, he has this whole theory about the pathway of awareness and 7-year cycles. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great theory, but that's what it feels like to me. Whereas the whole concept of consciously connected breathing, that feels immediately real to me. Yeah. The 7-year cycles feels like some dude's theory, and it's a nice theory, but it is a theory nonetheless. It didn't feel like an immortal truth, which hit me like a lightning bolt. That's somebody coming up with something like you would write an essay if you were doing a degree or a thesis at high school and go, oh, that sounds pretty fucking good. I'm going to stick this in the book. That's going to give me an extra 30 pages. You know what I mean? It didn't feel that didn't feel real to me, but it doesn't invalidate the book.
So this is cool because when I was pregnant, I watched this video that was, God, I hate it when people reference things and then they don't have the fucking name of the person, the place they saw it, but that's what I'm about to do. So forgive me in advance. But I watched a video that was by a quantum physicist who, through quantum physics, had really essentially moved through the mental realm into a space of much more of a sort of spiritual perspective. But he was giving an argument about sort of that journey and like how science took him into this space. And one of the things I found phenomenally fascinating, especially as a mother-to-be, was that he discovered, or I don't know if he discovered or if somebody else discovered and he just parlayed the information to me, but I discovered for the first time that when we are born, our cells, as most of us know, are regenerative, right? They die off and they are reborn constantly. And that in the first 7 years of our life, our cells, when they regenerate, are creative. So they are recreating themselves with nuance and difference and changes, adapting to our environmental situation. And so as a result, in those first 7 years, there is this open potential to really become almost anything because your cells are still creative and they're still reinventing themselves every time they regenerate. After about 7 years old, the cells stop being creative. And what they do is they implement a blueprint based on the previous 7 years. And this is scientifically researched information. And that blueprint becomes the blueprint for every cell in your body every time it regenerates for the rest of your life. That there is no longer the creativity that it used to have.
Yeah.
But as we all know, scientifically, that's very much about like synapses firing and the protein receptors that are receiving information and which pathways get used a lot and which pathways do not get used a lot. And there's a very strong argument that has been made that actually you can change that blueprint, but it takes a whole lot of work and effort, and it has to be very intentional, and you have to do something repeatedly over and over and over and over before those synapses will start firing into different protein receptors. But those first 7 years are the creative years, and then your cells are regenerating every 7 years so that you are literally a new human being every 7 years. And so while I completely agree with you that in all these books, there for me are moments where I feel like I am reading inspired information right now. It's not information, it's truth. It's not like cerebral, it's just truth distilled into words. And then there are other moments in every single one of these books where I go, okay, you know, we can all get on board with that idea or not, but it's sort of beside the point. You know, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong on this. And I think where I bumped up against Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsch so hard was it felt like it stayed in that mental realm so completely and utterly that I was longing for there to be a repose from, okay, we're thinking about this cerebrally, to like, let's just feel what is truth and what is not truth in all of this. And I know that my favorite, you know, sort of condensed line in Michael Brown's The Presence Process that sort of for me was like, oh, that distills it right there. He says, in essence, I dragged my intent to reunite with presence and to achieve present moment awareness out of the mental realm, rooting it on this earth as a practical, methodical, integrated process that balances the physical, mental, and emotional aspects of our experience. And for me, that was what I needed when I found this book, because I had completely reinvented my entire belief system over the previous 10 years to 15 years in this journey we've just gone through in the mini-series. I had completely thrown away everything I'd ever known to be truth about God or the universe or me or, you know, existence. And I had decided to start with a clean slate and allow truth to enter my life and be receptive to it. But that was all happening up here. Yeah. And I was like, how do I get it in here? Like, how do I get that to go from like, I understand these things to be true to like, I know them in the cellular makeup of my body. And that's what this process did for me. It became this practical way that I could take a sort of knowledge and turn it into a being, which is a complete way of existing.
That is fascinating, and I'm going to use myself as a human test subject, if you will, as the Bruce Banner of this moment, you know, and just put myself out there and see what happens when I actually apply it to myself and see where I get to with it. I'm hoping that I absorb that habit, because I think it's the only thing I really need to do to actually bring this into my core, to not be able to, not to be in a place where it can be distracted out of me, because I know it, I know it's meaningful and it works. That's what I know. I'm totally convinced about that. You know, it feels like the right thing. It's just establishing the habit.
Well, now I feel like I'm hyped it up so hard, I'm going to jinx your whole process.
Well, we will see.
Like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I know when I go into anything with high expectations, like a movie or a book or something, it never lives up. It just never can live up to it.
No, I think the great thing is, I don't think that what feels beautiful about it to me is my expectations aren't that high. It's not like, man, it's going to be like the closing 20 minutes of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the mysteries of the universe are going to lay themselves open to me, and I'm going to touch the star child and see my own life enveloped before me, sitting next to Keir Dullea. I don't think that will happen, but I think I just feel the simple truth of it. That to me is the brilliance of it. It feels like the truth.
I agree. And that's sort of what happened. Like, I mean, literally the last 20 minutes of 2000 Space Odyssey was what happened to me that first time that this healer guided me through a meditation. I mean, that is the best way that I could sort of connect anyone to what I experienced. And I remember afterwards having this very clear, first of all, overwhelming glow and joy that was like, you know, people describe when they've had a near-death experience, when they've like moved towards the light and come back. I had that kind of, what I was left with was a residual that lasted for weeks. And yet I found myself very clearly feeling like, but I have no desire to chase that experience again. There's nothing, if I wanted that experience all the time, I should just ascend. You know, I should just like, what's the point of being here? Like, that's not what the here is for. That's what there is for. Like, that, to me, that's what spiritual, like being a spirit is for. So I'm here in this body. That's not what I'm chasing. That's not what I'm interested in, because that is so removed from day to day, you know, fucking mothering, wifing, working, living, gardening, cleaning my toilets. Like, that's the gorgeousness of being alive. So what I was looking for was something that was much simpler, much less grand, something that could be integrated into a very sweet human daily existence that would just create, like, just allow me to savor and taste the flavors of all of it so much more vividly. And I have to, because I tend to be quite a grandiose person. I'm a Leo, so I am just like, everything wants to be big and grand and intense. And like, I don't have any casual friendships. All my friendships are intense. They're deep and they're intense. And so it's a challenge for me, but this process has helped me be more like you. It's helped me be more like my partner, Norman, where like, you guys are so connected to deep, profound truth, but it doesn't have to consume your thinking or your way of moving through the world, where it's just there. And it's just sort of simmering under the surface, allowing life to flow more easily, to be more beautiful, to be more loving. And I love being around people where I always call Norman, he's my natural Buddha. Yeah. Because he lives like Buddha, but he has no consciousness of it. He's not trying. He's never in his life read a book front to cover to back cover, except a cookbook. He's a fantastic cook. He is like never ever gone to been like a church person or a temple person or anything person. He doesn't really pray. Like, I've brought that into our family life, but he is so outside of it all, and yet it's there. It's just all there. It's just part of the makeup of his being. And for me, it's always a beautiful reminder that it doesn't have to be a cross that I carry on my back. It doesn't have to be this disciplined practice that I perform all the time. Like, it doesn't have to be any of that. It can be easy and light and beautiful. And it should be light. That should be the lightest thing we carry, is our connection to, the all, the consciousness we all share.
I love it. I think that is absolutely the hard degree moment right there. That's it. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's a great place to park our discussion, our detailed discussion about this very interesting for me book, which I would recommend anybody listening to this read, because it's a very easy to absorb roadmap to a practice that I honestly think can benefit everybody's life. And I think I haven't really felt that way about anything else we've been through so far, and they've all been interesting and informative and revelatory conversations. But I think this is something that is tremendously useful for everyone, and everyone would do well to check it out. And I can see why you carried around a crate of these books, giving them out to people at key strategic moments. Makes complete sense.
Yeah, it's sort of hard not to when you have something that really is a blessing to you. You want to share it. You want other people to be blessed. You're like, oh God, this thing was amazing. I really want you to have that beautiful experience too.
Yeah. So that's it, people. Check it out and have that beautiful experience. And Evangeline, next week will be our 6th episode of Evangeline Lilly's Library of the Soul, and it will be our 5th and final book for the time being, which is the Workaholics Anonymous Book of Recovery. So for anybody who wants to check out that book over the next week, what can you tell us about it, Evangeline?
Well, I think if we looked at these 5 books as a trajectory, if we looked at them in a sort of linear fashion, I would say that we have gone from faith to theory to practice. And this next book became the most grounded, the most practical, the most kind of industrial and, boots on the ground, practical tool for me in my spiritual walk, to really guide me through what is this new cultural existence of the 21st century that is so driven by commerce, that is so driven by consumerism, that humans have very much been reduced to cogs in a wheel of consumerist consumption. Whether you're on the production side or whether you're the buyer, that this has become so important. The economy has become so paramount that we have come to define ourselves by what we produce. And I would say as general observation of Western culture.
Yeah.
And we see our worth is in what we produce. We see our worth as in what we do as opposed to what we are, which is a beautifully created or beautifully, evolved creature, human being. And so for me, this was just, it's literally a 12-step program. It's a program that I came to through realizing I was unwell and I was addicted to being productive. I was addicted to being productive, not just at work. And that's the sort of misleading idea of workaholism, but I was addicted to being productive in my humanitarian work, my social activism, in my family life, in my work life, in my personal spiritual life. I mean, literally every second of every day had to be productive. And if it wasn't, I was wasting my life. And that had become a monkey on my back. And it had resulted in chronic pain, chronic illness, a total mental breakdown, a total physical and immune breakdown, a loss of almost everything I had built up through all of my years of success and joy and love. And I really needed just a step-by-step, hold my hand, sort of bring me back to the basics of who am I, what's my place, and what's worth my time, and where do I put my time, and where do I put my energy, and why am I not doing that already? What is it within me that is driving me to just keep doing, and really sit with that stuff? And I'm actually really grateful that I came to the presence process before I came to a 12-step process, because it really was a crucial tool in surviving what came up for me when I faced this workaholic tendency in myself.
I can't wait to get into discussing that with you. And that's the Workaholics Anonymous Book of Recovery, the very personal 12-step recovery program that was very meaningful to you. And if anybody wants to check that out before next week's episode, please go ahead and do so. In the meantime, this has been Hard Degree Presents.
So now here's the trouble with next week's book, and I'm just going to say this outright, is that it's extremely, in my opinion, extremely distracting to be reading two process books at the same time. Right? Because now there's like conflicting processes that want your time and attention. And so I'm very interested how you plan on navigating that. You said you want to dive straight into the process, which is great. And I guess in a way one could sort of elevate the other, or bring deeper insight into the other. But I'm curious what your plan is.
Well, my plan is mainly to read the Workaholics Anonymous Book of Recovery, but to focus on personally doing the presence process, because Workaholics Anonymous Book of Recovery, I think, is designed to address a bunch of issues that I don't have. Yeah, so I've never been kind of self-flagellating about my productivity or driven to produce on. I'm very much as it comes about those kind of things. And while I'm very structured in my thinking in terms of the things that I do, I'm just somebody who's just pulling the string and seeing where it goes. No plan, no structure. So on a macro level, I have no structure at all. On a micro level, I'm incredibly structured, but it means that the whole workaholic thing, kind of going, I must, all of that needs to be in place. I'm not like that. So that's, to me, is the value of next week's conversation, is talking to you about your experience of those issues and this tool that you've used to help you with that. But I don't think it's a tool I've ever needed. So that's the real interest for me from that conversation. Whereas the presence process, I absolutely need it.
I feel like that what you just described used to be exactly how I lived my life, that pulling the string and seeing what comes. I used to tell people all the time, I am entirely opportunistic. Yeah. I am the most opportunistic person. I don't plan shit, but everything falls into place and everything's always good for me. And then there was a switch that shifted, like I said, when I became so happy and content in my beautiful life with my partner, that I always blame him. I always say, you are the reason I became a workaholic, because I was so settled. Everything was so good. It was like, the world is my oyster. From here, from this solid, beautiful base, I can do anything. I just got to choose what it is.
Yeah.
And I couldn't choose. It was like, I'll do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this.
Yeah.
But then it became that shift away from, we'll talk about it next week. I just about dove into.
Oh yeah, okay. Just about to jump into the episode. No, it's good to keep our powder dry, as they said in the UK military. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, mate. It'll be great.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see you then.
Yeah, that was another great one, mate. You take care of yourself. Have a wonderful day. And I'll Evangeline Lilly's Library of the Soul with Evangeline Brains Lilly and myself, Andrew Sumner. And we'll see you next time around. Thanks for another great episode, mate.
It's been great, Andrew. I love talking to you.
Take care.
See you next week.
Yeah, next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to Hard Agree. This episode was edited by John Horsley and Kenrick Regan, and our theme music, Golden, was written and performed for this show by Liverpool's finest band, Denio. Hard Agree is a production of the Spoilerverse and myself, Andrew Sumner.